across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
The biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered spectacle. WION deciphers the images and the hues. Sifts real performance from rhetoric and noise, claims and counterclaims, populist pitches and hidden truths. Untangling, unraveling this celebration of democracy.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Raisha Saigal. On the show today, student demonstrations in the US of the war in Gaza have intensified and also expanded. Pro-Palestinian students have set up tent encampments at more campuses across the US, including University of Columbia and Berkeley. The new demonstrations follows the arrest of more than 120 demonstrators on NYU's campus. We'll of course be tracking that very closely here on World DNA.
Also on a World DNA today, the judge presiding over former US President Donald Trump's classified documents case unsealed a slew of documents which revealed that an associate of Trump had in fact warned him back in November 2021 to return White House records, citing the risk of indictment. And in Trump's hush money trial, tabloid publisher David Pecker has testified that he used his tabloid to suppress stories that might have hurt Trump's 2016 presidential bid. We are going to be tracking those developments right here on World DNA. Let's get you started with the other headlines.
On 200th day of Israel-Hamas war, IDF intensifies its operations against Hamas in Gaza. Residents claim non-stop bombings by the Israeli forces.
Israel has failed to achieve all of its goals, claims spokesperson of Hamas Qassam Brigade's Abu Ubaidah in a speech marking the 200th day of the war.
Families and supporters of Israeli hostages held in Gaza demonstrate in Tel Aviv as the time runs out. They say nothing has changed.
You are blocking vehicular traffic. Do not move and get onto the sidewalk.
Pro-Palestinian protests continue to rock major American universities, prompting school officials to take extraordinary steps to confront the growing crisis.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a 3-day China visit. The trip is Blinken's first to China since June as the U.S. tries to restore high-level engagements after spy balloon incidents and increased tensions around Taiwan.
China shows off its nuclear second strike capability just before US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Beijing and Shanghai.
A former tabloid publisher testifies in Donald Trump's hush money trial, says he promised to be the eyes and ears of the 2016 presidential campaign, which helped to suppress harmful stories.
The Israeli forces have stepped up their attack across Gaza as the war in West Asia enters its 200th day.
Right, Shivan. With the newest and more intensified attacks on Gaza, while fears continue to mount of an Israeli invasion in the overcrowded southern part of the besieged Gaza Strip. And all this amid calls for hostages to be freed.
Now, according to reports, the Israeli army carried out intense shelling of Gaza City overnight, with the military saying it also struck Hamas positions in South Gaza. Loud explosions were heard in southwest Gaza and Khan Yunis, while strikes hit the Voyager and Nusayrat refugee camps in central Gaza. Now, the report further adds that the Israeli military has ordered fresh evacuations in the north of the enclave,
warning civilians that they are in, and I'm quoting here, dangerous combat zone. The warning was asserted in a post by the Israeli army spokesperson, urging civilians of 4 zones in Beit Lahia on Gaza's northern edge to move to shelter into designated areas. He says the military will work with extreme force against militant infrastructure and subversive elements in the region.
Meanwhile, Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah group has launched its deepest attack inside Israel since the Gaza war began last year. Now, the militant group says it launched dozens of rockets at northern Israel in response to the killing of 2 civilians in a strike blamed on Israel in Lebanon's south.
In addition, Hezbollah's ally Hamas, in a televised speech marking the 200 days of war, said Israel has achieved none of its goals since it launched its war on Gaza. The militant group has also called for an escalation of war in all fronts. Hamas's spokesperson Abu Ubaidah from the Al-Qassam brigades made a public declaration to escalate the war across the Gaza Strip.
Now, on the other hand, back in Tel Aviv, public pressure continues to mount on Prime Minister Netanyahu's government to strike a truce deal to secure the release of the remaining hostages who are still held captive inside Gaza. Families and supporters of Israeli hostages held in Gaza protested in Tel Aviv, sitting on the ground with their hands bound and mouths sealed, conveying one message. And I'll quote here, 200 days and nothing has changed.
Today is the 200th day that we have hostages kidnapped. People, babies, women, old people, soldiers were kidnapped 200 days ago. My brother-in-law is back there in Gaza, and with 132 more people, it's too much. It needs to be end. We need to have our peace, and the families need to have peace, and this country need to have peace.
And as the war in West Asia drags on, its ripple effects are being felt elsewhere around the world.
US universities have become the latest flashpoint. And this as students across the country are holding pro-Palestine protests at different universities. In the latest, over 130 arrests have been made overnight as police crack down on protesters at the New York University campus.
Authorities in top American universities are scrambling to contain the demonstrations. Pro-Palestine demonstrations are taking place at Yale, Columbia, NYU, MIT and other campuses as well across the nation.
We're here first and foremost for a free and liberated Palestine, and we're also here to speak up about demilitarization of our campus and campuses across the country.
Protests at American universities have been ongoing for months now. However, they have flared up now after more than 100 pro-Palestinian demonstrators were arrested last week on the Columbia University campus in Manhattan.
According to the police at New York University, some 133 demonstrators were taken into custody after they refused orders to disperse. Although, according to reports, all of them were later released with summons to appear in court on disorderly conduct charges.
Meanwhile, police have also arrested 60 protesters in Connecticut, including 47 students at Yale University, after they refused to leave the premises. On the other hand, classes are going on in a hybrid mode at Columbia University until the end of the semester. US President Joe Biden, while reacting to the latest protests, said he condemns the anti-Semitic protests, while he also condemns those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians. As we mentioned earlier, it's the 200th day of war between Israel and Hamas. Now, Israeli strikes have intensified across Gaza in some of the heaviest shelling we've seen in weeks.
And the army has ordered fresh evacuations in the north of the Strip, warning civilians that they are in a dangerous combat zone. Airstrikes have been coupled with shelling from tanks on the ground combined, and they've led to mounting destruction. On a ride through the streets of North Gaza, you will witness nothing but mounds of rubble.
Veteran tabloid publisher David Pecker has testified that he pledged to be Donald Trump's eyes and ears during his 2016 presidential campaign.
Yes, he recounted how he promised the then contestant to help suppress stories that might harm Trump's campaign and even arranged to buy the silence of a doorman. More details coming up in our next report. Take a look.
David Pecker continued his testimony in Donald Trump's New York criminal trial Tuesday. The former National Enquirer publisher said he used the supermarket Tabloid to suppress stories that might have hurt Trump's 2016 presidential bid. Pecker said the decision followed a 2015 meeting at which he told Trump the Enquirer would publish favorable stories about the billionaire candidate and keep an eye out for people selling stories that might hurt him. Prosecutors say Pecker's actions helped Trump deceive voters by burying stories of alleged extramarital affairs at a time when he already faced multiple accusations of sexual misbehavior. The former president is charged with criminally falsifying business records to cover up a $130,000 payment to buy the silence of porn star Stormy Daniels, who says they had a sexual encounter 10 years earlier. Trump has pleaded not guilty and denied having an encounter with Daniels. His lawyers argue that Trump did not commit any crimes and only acted to protect his reputation.
They have a gag order which to me is totally unconstitutional. I'm not allowed to talk, but people are allowed to talk about me.
Trump again railed against a gag order that prohibits him from criticizing trial witnesses, court officials, and their relatives. Earlier, prosecutors requested that Trump pay a $10,000 fine, claiming he violated the judge's gag order. Trump's lawyer said he was only responding to political attacks and not intimidating witnesses. But the judge admonished Trump's lawyer, telling him, quote, "You're losing all credibility with the court." Still, the judge said he would not rule immediately on the prosecution's request.
Our correspondent Susan Tehrani explains the implications of Donald Trump violating the gag order and how might it impact his criminal trial. Take a listen.
Well, violating the gag order could lead to the former president being held in contempt of court, resulting in fines or even additional criminal charges. Now, this could further damage his credibility or undermine his defense strategy. Moreover, it also may limit the ability to speak publicly on the case on the part of the president, potentially hindering his political messaging. The judge's warning today to Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, suggests that the court is growing frustrated with the defense's tactics, which could ultimately influence the trial's outcome.
Susan further elaborates on the significance of David Pecker's testimony about the catch and kill practice and what it reveals about Trump's relationships. Listen to this.
David Pecker's testimony provides valuable insight into Trump's efforts to allegedly manipulate the media and silence potential scandals. The catch and kill practice, where the National Enquirer would purchase and bury unfounded stories, demonstrates the former president's willingness to use his connections and resources to control his public image. Pecker's testimony also highlights the former president's close relationship with media figures and his ability to leverage those connections for political gains. But could all of this even be damaging to Trump's defense? And is any of this illegal? We'll soon find out.
And seeing all the stories from the United States of America, former U.S. President Donald Trump brushed off warnings that he could be charged for keeping classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago residence.
Now, this was revealed after the judge presiding over Trump's classified documents case unsealed a slew of files. The documents are related to the FBI's investigation into the former president and the FBI's raid on his Mar-a-Lago estate in 2022. They are a redacted summary of the November 2022 interview given to the FBI by the witness, who is identified as person 16 and described as someone who worked at the White House when Trump was in power.
Well, the witness said that they urged Trump multiple times to return the records being sought then by the National Archives. The witness also said that they had urged Trump's children to give him the same warning, noting that the former U.S. president sometimes needed to be messaged the same thing from multiple people close to him. The documents revealed that Trump's Walt Nauta was told that if he was charged with lying to the FBI, the former U.S. president would pardon him when he won a second term in 2024. Nauta was charged in June last year with lying to the FBI and obstructing the investigation.
The documents released also included an FBI claim from June 2022 in which a counterintelligence official talked about carrying out loose surveillance on President Trump's plane to see if boxes of unclassified documents were indeed loaded onto the plane. The former president is facing 40 charges alleging he mishandled classified records and attempted to obstruct the government's retrieval of those records after he left the White House back in 2021. Prosecutors allege the documents contained national defense and weapons information, some of which had top secret markings. The top American diplomat Anthony Blinken has departed for China, with US-China ties at a critical point over numerous global disputes. Blinken will be visiting China for 3 days.
Yes, and he will hold talks with senior Chinese officials in Shanghai and Beijing. The trip will be Blinken's first to China since June, when America was trying to restore high-level engagements after spy balloon incidents and also increased tensions around Taiwan. Now, during his current visit to China, Blinken is expected to raise a number of concerns related to the South China Sea, the Russia-Ukraine war and the crisis in West Asia.
The State Secretary visit comes as Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden recently held talks on pressing issues, most notably regarding the ongoing confrontations in the South China Sea and peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Moreover, just 2 days before US Secretary of State departed for China, Beijing showed off its nuclear might. China displayed its nuclear second strike capability, that is to hit back after an enemy launches an initial nuclear attack.
The Chinese Navy released rare footage of the launch of a JL-2 ballistic missile from a nuclear submarine. Well, the video shows China's Shandong aircraft carrier fleet, including 4 submarines, during a simulated exercise.
China has taken another step to exert its power across the Taiwan Strait. Beijing has opened 2 new air routes,
with its flight paths located near Taiwan-controlled Kinmen and Matsu Islands. While China's move comes right before swearing-in ceremony of Taiwan's President-elect Lai Ching-te on the 20th of May.
Now, on April 19th, China's civil aviation regulator announced that it had started using 2 west to east flight paths from the coastal cities of Xiamen and Fuzhou. The new air routes, known as W122 and W123, will connect to M503 air route. Now, this air route will be operational alongside existing flight paths to 2 Taiwanese islands. And Chinese government claims that the move aims to relieve pressure caused by flight delays.
China has also said that it will optimize its operations from the 16th of May, which is just few days away from Lai Ching-te's inauguration ceremony. Beijing views Lai as an advocate of Taiwan independence. China claims Taiwan is a part of its own territory and has not ruled out the use of force to unite the island with the mainland Beijing. And Beijing views Lai as an advocate of Taiwan independence, like I mentioned earlier.
Taiwan's air traffic controllers said that they will strongly request their Chinese counterparts guide any aircraft away when an aircraft approaches the nation's airspace.
Well, shifting our focus to the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war. Well, as Ukraine's war with Russia rages on, Ukraine is now implementing several new techniques to strengthen military recruitment.
Kiev has now suspended consular services for Ukrainian men who are considered of fighting age to help boost the troops. Ukraine's foreign ministry announced a temporary suspension of the acceptance of new applications for consular services. This suspension is applicable for men between the ages 18 and 60 years.
But this is not the only measure that the government has implemented. A civil army of recruiters is working hard to get more people to enlist and also join the war. Here's a report with full details. Take a look.
Far from the trenches in Ukraine, recruiters armed with information packs offer patriotic volunteers an opportunity to join the war. As the country's efforts to conscript enough men to fight Russia are obstructed by public skepticism, defense officials are embarking on a serious charm offensive to recruit a citizens' army fit to fight the invasion. Oleksiy Bezhevets is a ministry advisor who is overseeing the drive.
Nations form themselves in fire. Now there's fire, and the nation is forming. This mobilization is one of the elements and one of the instruments that help a nation to form itself.
This softer call-up is being conducted on job search sites and outreach centres, as well as billboards and social media, and offers a wartime novelty, an element of choice. Recruits can choose their units and roles that suit their skills, as well as how long they will serve. This recruit says she wants to serve as a paramedic. The drive is also taking place online, in a glossy campaign by the 93rd Mechanised Brigade. Kiev is desperate to replenish its depleted forces, which are now vastly outnumbered and outgunned by Russia, as the war drags on into its third grinding year. The initial patriotic flood of volunteers who flocked to the army following the invasion in February 2022 has dried up. But the government understands the conscription drive has created its own difficulties, including thousands evading the draft and some fleeing abroad rather than risking the trenches. Bezhevitz says 13 of the new recruitment centres have opened since February, and the government plans to expand the number to 30 by the middle of the year. In March, Kiev's top general said the military would need to mobilise fewer people than the initial target of up to 500,000, in part because of volunteers.
All right, viewers, it's time now for a quick break.
But don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, we will tell you about how South Korean police have revealed that major North Korean hacking groups have been launching extensive cyber attacks against South Korean defense companies for over a year. And this has resulted in breaches of internal networks and theft of technical data from South Korean firms. We'll get you the full report on the other side of this break.
Also on the other side, the New York Stock Exchange is considering a dramatic shift in its operating hours in a move that could reshape the way stocks are traded. The exchange is gauging market interest in potentially transitioning to a 24/7 schedule. The full report right after this short break.
Togo's constitutional changes trigger popular protests after lawmakers approve reforms that may extend the 19-year rule of President Faure Gnassingbe. South Africa marks 30 years since its first post-apartheid election as the nation marks Freedom Day on April 27th, with polls to be held 2 days after defeat. And meet Pelumi Nubi, a Nigerian woman who completed a road trip from London to Lagos to promote a safe and borderless Africa. Watch World of Africa at these times, only on WION. World is one.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered spectacle. WION deciphers the images and the hues, sifts real performance from rhetoric and noise, and counterclaims, populist pitches and hidden truths, untangling, unraveling this celebration of democracy.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying with us. You're watching World DNA with me and Shivan. A look first at the headlines.
On the 200th day of the Israel-Hamas war, IDF intensifies its operations against Hamas in Gaza. Residents claim non-stop bombardment by the Israeli forces.
Israel has failed to achieve all of its goals, claimed spokesperson of Hamas's Qassam Brigade's Abu Ubaidah in a speech marking the 200th day of the war.
Families and supporters of Israeli hostages held in Gaza protest in Tel Aviv. As the time runs out, they say nothing has changed.
Do not move and get onto the sidewalk.
Pro-Palestinian demonstrations continue to rock major American universities, prompting school officials to take extraordinary steps to confront the growing crisis in the U.S.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is on a 3-day China visit. The trip is Blinken's first to China since June as the U.S. tries to restore high-level engagements after spy balloon incidents and increased tensions around Taiwan are souring ties.
A former tabloid publisher testifies in Donald Trump's hush money trial, says he promised to be the eyes and ears of the 2016 presidential campaign, helped to suppress harmful stories.
U.S. Senate votes overwhelmingly to give final approval to a $95 billion package of aid to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan, sends it to President Biden, ending months of uncertainty. Mother of Kerala nurse who is on death row in Yemen has reached the country's capital, Sana, 3 days after she began her journey from the southern Indian state of Kerala.
Nurse Nimisha Priya's mother reached Sana to meet her daughter in prison. Prema Kumari, accompanied by a Yemen-based businessman and social activist Samuel Jerome. They travelled overnight from Aden to Sana. They are currently completing a few procedures in order to meet Nimisha Priya in custody.
Nimisha Priya, an Indian nurse from Kerala's Palakkad, has been sentenced to death by a Yemeni court for killing a Yemeni citizen, Talal Abdul Mahdi. The case made headlines back in 2017.
In 2012, Nimisha went to Yemen as a nurse for the second time after 2008 and started a clinic in partnership with Mehdi. After setting up the clinic, Nimisha's husband and daughter returned to India, while the outbreak of conflict held her back. Following this, she was trapped by Talal Mehdi.
Nimisha and another Yemeni girl alleged that they were physically and mentally abused by Mehdi and their passports were seized. However, both of them managed to escape after injecting Mehdi with drugs.
Now let's take a look at all the news coming in from the world of technology. South Korean police have revealed that major North Korean hacking groups have been launching extensive cyber attacks against South Korean defense companies for over a year. And this has resulted in breaches of internal networks and theft of technical data from South Korean firms. As per the police, the hacking teams have implanted malicious codes directly or through contractors into the defense company's data systems. Working with National Spy Agency and private sector experts, the police traced the hacks, identifying the groups by source IP addresses, signal rerouting architecture and malware signatures. The police, however, did not disclose the name of the hacked companies or the nature of the breached data. South Korea is a major defense exporter and has signed contracts worth billions of dollars for mechanized howitzers, tanks and fighter jets in recent years.
CEO of Telegram, Pavel Durov, has criticized Apple's app policies after the company removed Telegram from its China App Store last week. Despite this move, Durov stated that there was no decrease in Telegram's downloads from China. In a post on his public Telegram channel, Durov confirmed that Apple had delisted several apps, including Telegram, from its China App Store last week.
Apple also removed WhatsApp, Meta's Threads and Signal from the App Store in China. Previously, Apple had released a statement saying that the Chinese government had ordered the removal of these apps due to national security concerns. However, according to Telegram's CEO, users in China utilize proxy tools like virtual private networks or VPNs to bypass the country's extensive censorship system to access Telegram. The European Commission has launched an investigation into the release of TikTok in France and Spain. Concerns have been raised about its potential addictive impact on children. TikTok offers a reward program where users earn points for various activities like watching videos or even inviting friends to the app. Belgium is enforcing the EU's Digital Services Act on the app, which requires online platforms to combat harmful content or face fines up to 6% of their revenue.
EU's industry chief Thierry Breton stated that they are prepared to suspend TikTok Lite unless compelling evidence of its safety is provided. TikTok has until Wednesday to present its case. And additionally, TikTok has 24 hours to provide a risk assessment report on TikTok Lite or face a fine of up to 1% of its revenue. In a remarkable feat of human perseverance, NASA engineers have re-established communication with the Voyager 1 spacecraft.
Earth's most distant emissary after months of troubleshooting a glitch that had rendered the probe's transmissions unreadable. Our next report getting you more.
4 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m.
Lost in translation, for months, NASA received nothing but garbled data from Voyager 1, the furthest human-made object in space. The silence stretched back to November 14, 2023, though the probe still responded to commands. Now there's good news. After months of tinkering, NASA engineers have coaxed Voyager 1 back into sending readable information. The culprit? Well, a single faulty chip in the probe's 46-year-old computer system. Launched in 1977, Voyager 1 became the first spacecraft to enter interstellar space in 2012. It's currently a mind-boggling 24 billion kilometers from Earth. So messages take at least 22.5 hours to reach it. Voyager 1 has a traveling companion, its twin, Voyager 2, which also left the solar system in 2018. Both probes carry a fascinating message for any potential alien life forms they might encounter, a golden record. These gold-plated copper discs, about the size of a record album, hold the story of our planet. The golden record includes a map of our solar system, a radioactive clock to help aliens date the probe's launch, and instructions on how to play the record. With their power banks expected to be depleted after 2025, the Voyager probe's journey will continue in silence, wandering the Milky Way for eternity, silent ambassadors of humanity's boundless curiosity and technological prowess. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On the world of business now, the New York Stock Exchange is mulling a dramatic shift in its operating hours.
This is, of course, in a move that could reshape the way stocks are traded altogether. The exchange is gauging market interest in potentially transitioning to a 24/7 schedule. Take a look at this next report to know more about this.
For most of 2023 and early 2024, investors in the market-leading Magnificent Seven big tech stocks reaped major returns. But last week, traders betting against those companies booked record-breaking gains. A multi-session stock slide of nearly $1 trillion across the Magnificent Seven was music to the ears of short sellers who earned more than $10 billion on the plunge, their biggest ever weekly profit. Their biggest gains came from short positions in shares of NVIDIA and Tesla, according to data company Ortex. Shares of NVIDIA, which had enjoyed a meteoric rise due to the chipmaker's dominance in artificial intelligence, shed almost 14% last week to clock its worst weekly fall in over 19 months. As a result, short sellers raked in more than $3 billion in profit. Last week's slide in shares of Tesla, which has lagged its Magnificent Seven peers this year, also led to $3 billion in profits for short sellers. And bets against Microsoft and Apple yielded $1 billion in profit each last week, according to the Ortex data. One investment director told Reuters that some of the declines may be attributed to an individual company's performance, such as weaker iPhone sales from Apple or Tesla's poor delivery numbers, while higher interest rates and regulatory pushback may be weighing on the sector as a whole. Tesla, Meta Platforms, Alphabet, and Microsoft will all be in focus this week as the companies gear up to report their quarterly earnings.
A legislation pushing Joe Biden to increase sanctions on Iranian crude oil is on track to become law as early as this week.
But experts are not expecting the president to fully use his new powers anytime soon. The measure was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives over the weekend as a response to Iran's attack on Israel earlier this month.
Now, on paper, they promised to broaden the scope of restrictions on Iran's exports of crude by extending coverage to foreign ports, vessels and refineries that knowingly engage in the trade. But oil market analysts say Biden will be loath to make any moves that could increase the price of crude or the gasoline that U.S. motorists buy at the pump.
The president is likely to take advantage of the waiver authority built into the sanctions and also avoid stringent enforcement. And this is according to the policy experts. The situation to some extent mirrors that faced by the Biden administration with Russia and also its invasion in Ukraine. Although the White House has imposed sanctions on Russia, it has tried to limit the country's revenues while allowing its oil exports to keep flowing so as not to squeeze global supplies and stoke inflation, an important domestic consideration for the president in an election year.
The administration also permitted Venezuelan oil to continue flowing last week, even as it renewed sanctions aimed at President Nicolas Maduro. The oil market is particularly sensitive right now to the potential for further constraints. Brent crude prices exceeded $92 a barrel earlier in April, their highest in almost 6 months, amid strong global demand and ongoing production cuts by OPEC and its allies. If implemented and enforced, the new sanctions could add as much as $8.4 to global prices, according to one estimate.
And well, Shivan, that would be bad news for Biden, who has already tapped the nation's strategic petroleum reserve after the cost of domestic fuel spiked higher in 2022. While U.S. gasoline prices are still some way off the levels seen then, they have advanced this year, with peak driving season still to come. The latest sanctions are a part of a foreign aid package slated for Senate passage later this week, and they include provisions to eliminate China's use of sanctioned Iranian oil. About 80% of Iran's roughly 1.5 million barrels per day of exports go to China to be processed by small independent teapot refineries.
The legislation would expand the definition of a significant financial transaction under existing U.S. sanctions to include transactions of any size made between Chinese and Iranian financial institutions to purchase Iranian oil. Now, experts say Biden is unlikely to enforce these measures with gusto due to domestic political and economic compulsions. But sanctions waivers may become harder for Biden to defend if Iran and its proxies engage in more direct aggression towards Israel.
Well, let's now see what's making news in the world of sports. Arsenal have turned up the heat on fellow Premier League title contenders with a statement